Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic day and that summer is being bright and sunny for you and bringing prosperous energy. I have something a little more personal, I guess, kind of to start with, some anecdotal personalness before we get into the main topic of today, which is about death. So, I laugh. Okay, pagans look at death differently than most other religions, and we'll get into why here in a second. Okay, so anecdotal story first. Every morning recently I've been getting up and there is a yellow swallowtail that flies around my house. And it doesn't matter if I'm in the front yard or the backyard, I see it every morning. It's beautiful. It's a large, what I think is a male. It doesn't let me get too close, so I can't really judge on the wings, whatever. Anyway, so it's a really beautiful yellow and black swallowtail, and it flies around my house. And butterflies are a symbol of transitions and change and metamorphosis, and specifically the yellow and black butterfly is a symbol of death and new beginnings. Now, when a lot of people see death as something that is associated with what they're working with, it can be intimidating because death in our society is feared. Until I was a grown-up, I never really fully understand why people... Okay, another anecdotal story. The energy of a graveyard is very overwhelming for me, and I associated that with necrophobia. And to the point where there were roads growing up that when I started driving, and I'd have to drive down, let's say Wadsworth, I'd drive down Wadsworth, there's a huge cemetery, and I would literally drive 2 blocks. I would know when to turn. I would drive 2 blocks over, 2 blocks up, and I would totally avoid it. I couldn't handle it. I'll never forget my grandpa's funeral. I went to his funeral, and I wouldn't get out of the car. It was too much for me to handle. And I just remember being in the back seat, my mom being like, "Get out of the car. Come on, you have to get out of the car. We can't leave you in the car." And I was crying, and I was very upset. And I was like, "I don't want to be here. This is not cool." And so that energy of the graveyard I associated with fear because it was scary to me. And now as an adult and through working with that fear, getting past that fear and realizing that energy is not something that is to be feared, it was just a grand energy. And as a child, it was overwhelming. And I didn't know how to handle that. And everyone around me was very upset. And the whole situation was just too much. I was probably 8, and it was just way too much. And then from that moment, for a really long time, I was scared of death. Not scared of dying, but scared of dead things. And it was hard to explain to people how I didn't fear death because death is just another step in life, but I did fear dead things. And it was really bad for a while. I'd had a tarantula for like 10 years. And when Rosie, obviously a rose-haired tarantula, that's what we all name them, when she passed, I literally put a towel over her terrarium and didn't touch it. I just pretended it wasn't there. I did the same thing with my lizard. And I actually still have his bones. He, being a lizard, and he was I caught him wild. He's a little Texas lizard that me and my cousin broke the window. He came in the window. My nunu caught him, and I drove him home from Texas to Colorado in a box. And my nunu the whole time kept telling me he's gonna die. I would make him pull over, we'd catch some bugs, I'd put him in the box, we'd keep driving. And again, I had him for what seems like forever. And when I was a teenager and my necrophobia was the worst, I did the same thing. So I had this shelf in my room where the 2 dead things were covered with blanket or towels. And I just, they were not there. It was gone. I just pretended that they weren't there because I couldn't open it and look at it and deal with it. And death was the dead thing. It was the energy that was present in those spaces. And so now as a grown-up and knowing more about this energy, dealing with that energy, I now can go to a graveyard and we're past all of that. But it took understanding one, the energy of death and that transformation, and what a grand energy that is. And two, letting go of some of the societal norming from the Christian society that we live in, and the fear of death. And one of the things that actually helped, like, oh, this clicked, is that I went to a funeral, a Christian funeral, and the whole time it was, they just put so much fear into people, like during the funeral. So you're in a state of grief, and then the Bible passages that they read and the things that they say and the things that they talk about were like coaxing more fear out of you about death, and oh, thank goodness that this person accepted Jesus into their heart, because now they can go to heaven and they're not going to go to hell, because if you don't accept Jesus into your heart, you're going to hell. Interesting phenomenon about the word hell. If you look back through time and you start translating this word, the word hell means underground, like literally underground. I've met Christians who are very devout who literally translate hell to being buried in the ground, and thus why Christians bury their bodies whole in the ground and not burn them like the pagans did. So just an interesting twist on that definition. And the evil hell that we know and love to see in scary movies and all of those things wasn't created until much later. It's not in the Bible. So all of those things are more modern. They came through fear mongering and control and trying to teach people how to act. So there's like some grand punishment that you get if you don't do good, which is almost ironic, because they also have this system of, if you come and tell me what you did wrong and you confess your sins and you are remorseful and you change, which I think a lot of people forget, you make that change, then it's okay. If you did bad, you can now be good. The whole setup is just interesting, but there's a lot of fear there, and death is really used as a heavy token. And so if we let go of all that fear and we move past it, and we don't let it control our thoughts and actions and moral compass, you get a whole new perspective on death. And like I said in the past life regression video, if the purpose of this life is to experience, and we're born again and again and again, then you shouldn't fear death. It's just the end of this presence and a new opportunity for your soul to experience something new. So it's not a bad thing. And even in our life, death is seen through different things. So you have the death of your childhood, the death of your adolescent mindset, the death of your single mindset, which some people have trouble with. Some people have trouble letting go of their childhood. That mentality, your brain and your level of maturity and the way that you interact with the world goes through these transitions. They're grand life stages. And this isn't a pagan thing. This is like Eric Erickson wrote about this in psychology, and there's a lot of psychology behind this, is that you have these different life stages, and through each one, the old one must be let go of, and it dies, it goes away, and then a new one is created. And this is a process of life, and this happens throughout all things. So back to the anecdotal story with the butterfly. The yellow butterfly is a symbol of death and transformation, and the gods letting you know that this is a time when you are encouraged to continue that change, make that change, honor that change, grieve the self that you were, and move past that into the person that you're going to be. Your path is, you have a new path created, and you have to take that path. If you're standing at those crossroads, which is the irony of all of that energy coming together. So when you start thinking about your life paths, so as a child you have this life path, and then you become a grown-up and you make new choices, and you make new choices, and it sends you off on different paths. People influence you, and people come in and out of your life, and different things change, but you keep going on these paths. If you come to that crossroad and you can't let go of the path behind you, then you end up kind of stuck at that crossroad, and in not honoring that crossroad and moving on forward to the next one, you end up kind of like stuck in the mud. And that's when you start seeing a repeat of patterns. Another anecdotal, I guess, kind of just from my own personal thing. In, this transition that I'm going through right now, as I look back, a long, long time ago, there was a point when this cycle of repetitiveness started, and the same problems kept coming and coming and coming and coming and coming. And even the people involved in the problems were like, oh my God, what is the problem? Why do we keep coming to this problem? We're all magical people. We all should be able to see the reality right here in front of us. What is it? Now, because there was a lot of love and there was a lot of connections in there, it was really hard to see that the problem was those connections, and that it was just time to let go and move forward. And so we came to this crossroad that we didn't even know we were standing at. And I think there were hints here or there. There were times that were more challenging than others. But let's see, 2008, and that's 12 years. And 12 years of going through the same cycle, of having the same problems over and over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, 12 years is a long time to cycle through the same problems. And coming to minor solutions, but never really pinpointing that. Well, when we got to that crossroads, we didn't see what we needed to let go of. So we didn't let go of it. And it was like a tether holding us to this path. And even though we were like able to venture, it was like a bungee cord, I guess. So you're able to go down this new path for so long, but you're tethered to something. And if you don't let that die, and you don't let it end to be something new, then you're just going to keep that tether, and you're just going to be stuck there. And so even when those transitions are hard, in this recent transition, I lost a friendship that I've had for over 20 years. And that's a hard thing to let go of emotionally, mentally, in my life. Like, someone who you've been, in a relationship for 20 years with is really embedded into your life. And so making that transition forward and letting that die and letting that end and being able to venture out onto this new, it's like a weight off your chest. You can just take a deep breath and you're like, whew, and seeing this butterfly every morning is a great reminder from the divine that this is something that needs to happen, where this transition is happening. It's a good transition, and you have to continue to let that path die and be in the past. And, even if the person comes back in your life later, or the things come back in your life later, that's a new crossroad. This one, it's time to move on. So when you start getting symbols from nature about death, it doesn't mean that you're going to die. It doesn't mean that this is the end. It just means that this is the end of this. This is the end of this moment and this path and this, experience. And now it's time to let that experience be done. We've had it. It's been there. You've learned from it. Take those lessons. Take the happy things. Take the things that you need from that. And let's move forward and let go of that tether and let go of those things in the past. And it shouldn't be feared. Like I said, we've all met someone who hasn't let go of that childish mentality, and they just hold on to it. And you talk to them and you're like, you have that coworker or that person who can't cut a circle. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you all know those people who are like, I can't cut a circle, or I don't understand how you do this, or there are some things that they can't move forward because they're still holding on to this and they haven't let go for whatever reason. And some of the times that's traumatic, and sometimes it's just because you really like it, or sometimes for, everyone's got their own reasons, but, they haven't let go of that mentality. We've all met that guy who was in the frat house who hasn't let go of that frat house mentality, and you're like, dude, you're 30 years old. Put the kegger down, go to work, or whatever it may be. It's because they didn't let that path die. They didn't let that part of themselves, be the experience and happen and be done with. Okay, phew, I got everything I can get out of it. I've already had that experience, and now it's time to move forward. So death is not this scary doom of death. That's not what it is. This is a transition. This is a time of something new. So there's, yes. Sorry. My brain was flooded with all of these thoughts about the numerology of 2020 and all of the change that's happening globally and all of these things that are happening. And Venus is coming out of retrograde. So we're going to want to have some love in our life, and we're going to want to be sending out those feelers again, and we're going to stop criticizing our relationships and over-evaluating the people around us. And as you do that, I guess this is why that's relevant. So as Venus comes out of retrograde and we start seeing, okay, maybe I've been a little overcritical of this relationship or this or that, that's when it gets really easy to go back into those comfort zones. Okay, we spent all of this time analyzing these relationships and being like, is this really valuable? Does this really bring me the things that I need? Is this a mutual relationship? We've been fighting with those people. We've been dealing with these things. We've decided we didn't want to be friends or in that relationship or with that person or whatever it may be. But now that Venus comes out of retrograde and we're back into feeling this love, we're like, oh, this was comfortable and I loved that and I missed that, and you're going to think about those good times. But you have to remember, Venus's retrograde is there to help you see the problem so that you can correct it, and not so that you can go back to it as soon as that energy shifts back to sending out, connections and bonds and wanting to do that. Don't let that transition allow you to go back into those patterns that you were in before with destructive relationships. Don't go back to what's comfortable because it's comfortable. Let that experience be that experience. Let it die and transition into something new. And do something for yourself. Do some love for yourself. Let this transition happen. Let that flower blossom. And then see what happens. And then when you're in that secure place of this new transition that we've all been in, even if it's something that you're still not even sure of what's happening, there's been some kind of transition because the stars have aligned in such a way and everything is happening. As these planets come out of retrograde and we go back to this non-retrograde energy, don't go back to those comfort levels. Let that die. Let that transition happen. Let that growth happen and move forward. And that's one of those important lessons. So don't fear when you see something, you get the death card, or you get, you see that yellow butterfly, or the ravens are squawking at you and they're telling you that transition is happening, and let it happen. Let it go. Let it happen. Move forward. And don't fear that. So fear is going to be one of your greatest adversaries in your whole journey along this natural faith. Fear was ingrained to us through our society, and it's taught us to fear, but that's what's going to hold you back. So don't let it hold you back here. Don't see death as the end-all doom. See it as the beautiful transition that it is. See it as allowing new growth to happen. Let that old experience be the fertilizer for the new growth that you're in the middle of. So I hope everybody has a blessed transformation. I hope that the gods are helping you along the path, and I hope that you're seeing those omens as they need to be seen. If you have any questions about it, you just let me know. I'm always here. I hope everyone is having a great summer and that your transition from spring to summer has been grand. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope everybody has a blessed day.